On August 23, 1305, London awakens to a spectacle that will haunt history forever. Thousands gather in the streets, traders deserting their booths, aristocrats emerging from their mansions, peasants flooding in from surrounding villages. They hunger not for commerce or sustenance, but for carnage. They have assembled to witness a human being perish in the most savage manner their cruel minds can conceive. From afar comes the terrible symphony, timber grinding against stone, horses' hoofs striking cobblestone, and something far worse, something that churns the soul. It is the sound of human flesh scraping across jagged streets, painting a bloody path for scavenging birds to follow. The mob divides like a putrid ocean, revealing the broken figure bound naked to a wooden cart dragged by a destrier. This is William Wallace, the warrior who dared envision a liberated Scotland, now transformed into mutilated flesh destined for slaughter. His frame bears England's wrath like a living testament. Every rock along the 400-mile march from his homeland has carved its signature into his skin. His flesh dangles in tatters, his spine displays a pattern of lacerations, yet his gaze, merciful heaven, his gaze continues blazing with rebellion. Despite everything, despite the jeering masses hurling excrement at his mangled body, William Wallace remains unbroken. To comprehend the nightmare awaiting Wallace in these final hours, we must travel back 3.5 decades to a Scotland that once breathed freely. The year stands at 1270, and among the verdant slopes of Renfrewshire, a son is delivered to Sir Malcolm Wallace, a modest landholder whose highest dream involves cultivating his estate and honoring his liege. They christen the infant William, never imagining this child will someday provoke Europe's mightiest sovereign to demand his destruction. Young William matures into a towering figure beneath Scotland's majestic peaks. He masters literacy, an extravagance for common men, absorbs Latin from monastery teachers, and cultivates an intellect keen as forged steel. Yet his physical gifts set him apart most dramatically. Upon reaching his 20th winter, William Wallace towers nearly 6 feet 7 inches, a colossus among mortals, bearing shoulders capable of supporting a kingdom's aspirations and possessing hands mighty enough to brandish a 6-foot blade with lethal mastery. Scotland during William's youth represents a kingdom blessed with tranquility. King Alexander III governs with sagacity and authority, allowing the realm to flourish. Marketplaces thrive, crops yield abundantly, and citizens rest peacefully in their chambers. Yet destiny, that merciless sovereign, harbors different intentions. During 1286, on a tempest-ravaged evening seemingly conjured from dark prophecy, Alexander III spurs his mount over precipitous cliffs near Kinghorn. His demise signals Scotland's golden epoch crumbling into ruin. The crown transfers to Margaret, Norway's maiden, a 3-year child who has never touched Scottish soil. For 4 winters, the kingdom teeters precariously, governed by regents and consumed by conspiracy. Then, during 1290, young Margaret perishes while voyaging to claim her birthright. Scotland discovers itself monarchless, directionless, and poised to make choices that will baptize the land in gore for countless generations. Behold Edward Longshanks, Edward I of England, whose very epithet speaks to his commanding stature. Rising 6 feet 2 inches in an era when most men scarcely achieved 5.5 feet, Edward embodies a warrior monarch who has devoted his existence to conquest. Wales has already experienced his iron boots' crushing weight, and now his ravenous attention shifts northward toward Scotland. When Scottish nobility, frantic to prevent civil warfare, invite his arbitration between rival throne claimants, they unknowingly welcome the predator into their midst. Edward selects John Balliol, a feeble character the English sovereign believes manageable as a marionette dancing on strings. Yet Edward's designs reach far beyond mere kingmaking. He insists Scottish lords render homage directly to him, that Scottish legal matters appeal to English tribunals, and that Scottish warriors serve in his foreign campaigns. Each requirement tightens the strangling cord around Scotland's throat. By 1296, even the cowardly Balliol cannot endure further degradation. He attempts asserting Scotland's sovereignty, forging French alliances and rejecting his subservience to Edward. The English monarch's retaliation proves swift and pitiless. His legions surge across borders like devastating locusts, and their first target, Berwick-upon-Tweed, becomes testimony to English savagery. Berwick's destruction achieves such completeness, such uncompromising brutality, that it brands itself permanently into Scotland's collective memory. Edward's warriors don't merely vanquish defenders, they massacre every breathing soul within reach. Men, women, children, nursing infants still clutched to their mothers' bosoms, all succumb beneath English blades. 17,000 lives vanish in one day, their sole transgression being born beyond an imaginary boundary. This represents the Scotland molding William Wallace, this furnace of violence and bloodshed forging his adamantine determination. When Edward strips Balliol of crown and regalia, compels his public humiliation in undergarments, and proclaims himself Scotland's overlord, young William observes from shadows. When Scottish aristocrats genuflect and endorse the ragman role, pledging loyalty to their conqueror, William's jaw hardens with revulsion. When English officials begin distributing Scottish territories to their associates, treating the noble kingdom like battlefield plunder, something essential shatters within the young Titan from Renfrewshire. The catalyst igniting Wallace's insurrection arrives during May 1297, and like numerous historical turning points, it commences with something intimate and minor. Precise details remain lost to time, perhaps his beloved Marion Braidfield's murder, as subsequent ballads claim, perhaps merely witnessing excessive injustice. But when William Wallace unsheathes his sword against William Heselrigg, Lanark's English sheriff, he crosses boundaries permitting no return. Heselrigg's slaying reverberates throughout occupied Scotland. Here, finally, stands someone willing to spill English blood. Here walks a man refusing submission, who confronts Edward Longshanks's seemingly invincible military apparatus and declares, "Never again." The response proves immediate and electrifying. Men begin vanishing from farmlands and workshops, stealing away into woodlands and highlands to join Wallace's expanding rebel brotherhood. But William Wallace transcends mere outlaw leadership. He possesses qualities transforming scattered resistance into coordinated rebellion, exceptional tactical genius combined with unwavering faith in Scotland's freedom rights. When addressing assembled multitudes, his voice resonates with divine authority. "We battle not for glory or treasure," he proclaims, "but for liberty alone, which no honorable man surrenders except with life itself." The conclusion arrives during August 1305, not through glorious combat but via treachery's most despicable form. John Menteith, a Scottish knight who has bartered his soul for English coin, entices Wallace to a Glasgow meeting. Perhaps Menteith promises assistance for renewed uprising, perhaps he offers intelligence regarding English military movements. Specific details prove insignificant. What matters? William Wallace, exhausted by years hiding, desperate for any opportunity striking back at enemies, walks into a snare costing him everything. When English soldiers encircle him, Wallace's instinct demands fighting. But he stands alone, outnumbered, and years of constant flight have extracted their toll. The giant who once strode across battlefields like natural forces finds himself shackled with chains, a trophy for delivery to his greatest foe. The London journey serves humiliation equally with transportation. Wallace endures parade through every major town, displayed like captured wildlife for English crowds' entertainment. Children hurl stones at his cage, adults launch filth and curses. Each mile carries him further from the homeland he fought liberating and closer to awaiting torment. Edward Longshanks could have simply executed Wallace and finished it, quick drop, snapped neck, and Scotland's greatest champion would be silenced eternally. But Edward seeks no mere execution. He desires crafting a spectacle so horrifying, so absolutely terrifying, that it will crush resistant spirit for generations ahead. He wants every Scot hearing Wallace's fate to understand defying English rule's price. At Westminster Hall, surrounded by English authorities' physical manifestations, William Wallace confronts his accusers. The charges pronounced against him would seem ridiculous if their consequences weren't so catastrophic: treason against King Edward, though Wallace never swore English crown fealty; murder and theft, though his victims were occupation soldiers and seized wealth funded Scotland's liberation. Given opportunity to speak, Wallace's response thunders through the hall with tremendous force: "I cannot betray Edward, for I was never his subject. I owe him no loyalty. He is not my sovereign." These words determine his fate, though that destiny was decided long before entering the hall. The judges, their verdict predetermined, announce the sentence transforming William Wallace from man to martyr, to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. Even in medieval England, celebrated for creative cruelty, this punishment represents judicial savagery's absolute pinnacle, reserved exclusively for traitors. It is designed not merely for killing but for complete destruction. The condemned will experience multiple deaths, each more agonizing than the last, until nothing remains except scattered fragments for ravens. August 23, 1305's morning dawns grey and foreboding. London has buzzed with anticipation for days. At Smithfield, the execution ground, a platform rises in the field's center, surrounded by crude wooden barriers containing crowd distance. The executioner awaits beside his instruments like a craftsman preparing his masterwork. What follows defies every natural human endurance law. Wallace is slowly hanged until nearly deceased, then revived. While still conscious, he is disemboweled, his organs burned before his eyes. Finally, he is castrated and quartered, his head mounted on London Bridge and his limbs dispatched to Scotland's four corners as warning to all who would dare follow his example. But tyrants throughout history never understand martyrdom's fundamental truth: the body's death can birth something far more powerful than any individual man. Even as Wallace's remains decay on their spikes, something awakens in Scottish hearts. His execution's brutality, rather than intimidating people into submission, ignites fury that will burn for generations. Within months of Wallace's death, Robert the Bruce declares himself Scotland's king. The independence wars, far from ending with Wallace's execution, enter a newer and more savage phase. For Wallace becomes the Scottish battle cry, and its sound strikes terror into English hearts. The man who died in agony at Smithfield, his body torn apart and scattered to winds, achieved through death what he could not accomplish in life. He became immortal, not in flesh, but in the undying spirit of people who refused bowing to any master except their own choosing. In dying as he lived, unbroken, unbowed, and utterly defiant, William Wallace achieved the only victory that truly matters: he became eternal.